Leela Carter stood in her tiny San Francisco apartment, adjusting the collar of her navy blazer in front of a cracked mirror. At 32, she'd spent 8 years chasing scoops as an investigative journalist, digging up corporate scandals, exposing crooked politicians, the works. But today was different. Today was her first day as Novatech's director of communications. A leap into the corporate world she'd once only written about. She smoothed her dark, wavy hair, grabbed her bag, and muttered to herself, "You've got this. Time to make waves in a new pond." 40 minutes later, she stepped off the bus and stared up at Novatech's sleek headquarters, a towering glass beast in the heart of the city. The lobby buzzed with hoodie-clad techies clutching laptops, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Lila, in her blazer and heels, felt like a fish out of water, but she didn't care. She wasn't here to blend in, she was here to shake things up. Her new office was a small, modern space on the 15th floor. Glass walls, a view of the bay, and a desk that still smelled like fresh wood. Her assistant Jamie, a wiry 20-something with a nervous grin, showed her in. "You're the first comms director we've had in a year," he said, shifting on his feet. Mr. Hayes? Doesn't keep people in this role long, heads up." Leela raised an eyebrow. "Ethan Hayes, the CEO?" Jamie nodded, lowering his voice. "Yeah, he's intense. Good luck," she smirked. "Thanks, but I've interviewed worse. I'll handle him." She settled in, flipped open her laptop, and started drafting an intro email to the team. Something punchy to set the tone. But first, she wanted to brag to her best friend Sarah, a freelance writer who'd been her rock through every career pivot. She opened her email app and typed fast. "Day 1 at Novatech. CEO Ethan Hayes is a total dictator vibes, but I'll whip this place into shape. Watch me." She hit send, grinning, until her stomach dropped. She hadn't sent it to Sarah. In her rush, she'd pulled Ethan Hayes' address from the company directory instead. There it was, glaring back at her in the sent folder. To Ethan Hayes at novatech.com. "No, no, no," she hissed, nearly knocking her coffee mug off the desk. Her hands shook as she checked the time. Sent 2 minutes ago. He might not have seen it yet. She had to delete it. Lila bolted from her chair, turning to Jamie outside her door. "Where's the CEO's office?" His eyes widened. "You're going there now? He hates interruptions, especially on Mondays." "If I don't interrupt him, I'm toast," she snapped, already striding toward the end of the hall. A heavy oak door loomed ahead, a sleek plaque reading, "Hayes, CEO." She knocked once. No answer. She pushed it open a crack, empty. The room was huge. Glass desk, black leather chair, shelves stuffed with tech books, and a tall wardrobe in the corner. Ethan's laptop sat open on the desk, screen glowing. "Perfect," she muttered. "Delete it and get out." She darted toward the desk, but then a faint sound stopped her cold. Water running from a small bathroom off to the side. He was here. Before she could think, the bathroom door swung open. In a panic, Lila dove into the wardrobe, yanking the door shut just enough to hide. It was dark inside, the sharp scent of cedar and cologne hitting her nose. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't notice, but luck wasn't on her side. The wardrobe door flew open, and there stood Ethan Hayes, tall, dark hair damp and sticking to his forehead, bare-chested with a white towel knotted around his waist. Water droplets glistened on his shoulders, and his piercing gray eyes locked onto her like she'd just beamed in from Mars. "Carter," he said, his voice low and sharp enough to cut glass. "What the hell are you doing in my wardrobe?" Lila's mind raced. She grabbed a shirt hanging next to her like it was a shield. "I, was checking storage space, for team morale. Comfort matters, right?" He didn't blink, his frown deepening. "You check storage by hiding in it?" She swallowed, forcing a smile despite her pounding heart. "Okay, fine. I got the wrong room. My bad. I'll just... She tried to sidestep him, but he moved forward, blocking her path. His arms crossed, the towel slipping just enough to make her look away fast, cheeks burning. Not so quick, he said. I just saw an email from you. Interesting stuff. Trying to delete it, huh? Layla froze. He'd read it. He stepped to his desk, tapped his laptop, and read aloud. Day 1 at Novatech. CEO Ethan Hayes is a total dictator vibes, but I'll whip this place into shape. Dictator vibes, huh? His lips curled into a dangerous smirk. Who do you think you are, Carter? It was a joke, she stammered. Just blowing off steam. I'm here to help, not... Help? He cut in, his tone icy. Impressive start, sneaking around like a spy. You've got 2 weeks to prove you're not a waste of space. Don't screw it up. He turned away, leaving her standing there, heart racing, wondering if she'd just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Leila Carter walked out of Ethan Hayes' office with her pulse still hammering, the image of him standing there in nothing but a towel burned into her brain. She shook it off, muttering under her breath, "Focus, Leila. You've dealt with worse than a grumpy CEO." Back at her desk, she decided one thing. She wasn't about to let that wardrobe fiasco define her. She'd prove her worth. Dictator vibes or not. The next few days at Novatech were a whirlwind. Lila threw herself into her new role, drafting a bold communications plan to hype up the company's latest AI gadget, a sleek little thing that could predict your grocery list before you even knew you were hungry. She spent late nights crunching data, pulling stats on how competitors like Google and Tesla were killing it with flashy campaigns. Her pitch was simple. Novatech needed to stop playing safe and start making noise. She emailed it to Ethan with a subject line that practically dared him to read it. AI launch campaign. Let's not bore the world. His reply came the next morning, short and brutal. Too expensive, too flashy, rejected. No explanation, no discussion, just a digital slap in the face. Lila stared at her screen, gripping her coffee cup so hard it creaked. Seriously? Does he think people buy tech because it's quiet? She wasn't letting this slide. She fired back an email packed with numbers, market trends, ROI projections, the works, ending with a jab. Ignoring this won't make us efficient, Mr. Hayes. It'll just make us invisible. The tension hit boiling point at the next all-hands meeting on the 15th floor. Ethan stood at the front of the room in a sharp black suit, his voice cool and clipped as he ran through updates. Lila sat near the back, her notebook full of scribbled counterpoints. When he opened the floor for questions, she didn't hesitate. She stood up, heels clicking on the tile, and said, "Mr. Hayes, if we're so efficient, why did 3 of our top designers jump ship to Tesla last month? Was it the weather? Or maybe our bonuses stuck in the Stone Age?" The room went quiet. A guy from engineering coughed into his sleeve. The CFO, a slick 50-something named Paul, smirked like he was watching a train wreck unfold. Ethan's gray eyes locked onto her, unblinking, and for a second she thought he might fire her on the spot. Instead, he said, "You've got opinions, Carter. Bring me hard data, not guesses." Then he walked out, leaving her fuming and the team whispering. Word spread fast. By lunch, the break room was buzzing. "Lila and Ethan are at it again," a coder named Mia said over her sandwich. "They fight like an old married couple." Her buddy from design laughed. $10 says they're dating by Christmas. That kind of heat doesn't just fizzle out, Lila overheard as she grabbed a water from the fridge, rolling her eyes so hard she nearly strained something. Date Ethan Hayes? "I'd rather wrestle a bear," she muttered. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the thought. He was a jerk, cold, stubborn, impossible, but those eyes had a way of sticking with you. The clashes didn't stop. A week later, Leila pitched a social media blitz to tease the AI launch. Short videos, snappy hashtags, the whole deal. Ethan shot it down in a meeting with the leadership team, his voice flat. "We don't need gimmicks. Focus on the product." She leaned forward, hands on the table. "The product's great, but nobody's buying it if they don't know it exists. Competitors are eating our lunch because we're too cheap to shout." Paul snorted, but Ethan just stared at her, jaw tight. "Do your job, Carter, not mine," he said, ending the discussion. By the end of her second week, Lila was a company legend, and not always in a good way. People respected her guts, but whispered she was pushing Ethan too far. Jamie cornered her one afternoon by the coffee machine, looking worried. "You're killing it with these ideas, but Ethan's not budging. He slashed the last comms budget after the old director bailed. Maybe ease up?" Lila shook her head, pouring herself a black coffee. "I didn't leave journalism to play it safe, Jamie. He'll see I'm right, one way or another." That night, alone in her apartment, Leela sprawled on her couch with a glass of wine, replaying every spar with Ethan. She hated admitting it, but there was something electric about going toe-to-toe with him. He wasn't just a wall. She could see the cracks, the way his mouth twitched when she landed a good point, like he was fighting not to smile. "Get a grip, Leela," she told herself, draining her glass. "Is your boss, not your sparring partner." But the next day, when she passed him in the hall, him in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, her in her usual blazer, he didn't glare like usual. His gaze lingered, sharp but curious, and for a split second, she wondered if he felt it too. She brushed it off, heading to her office with a new plan brewing. If Ethan wanted a fight, she'd give him one he couldn't ignore. She wasn't here to lose. Not to him, not to anyone. Lila Carter was 3 weeks into her war with Ethan Hayes when the bombshell dropped. She'd just finished a heated email exchange with him, her pushing for a press release on the AI gadget, him dismissing it as pointless noise, when he strode into her office unannounced. His tie was loose, his dark hair slightly messy, and his gray eyes had that storm cloud intensity she'd come to recognize. "Carter," he said, shutting the door behind him, "pack a bag. We're going to LA tomorrow." She blinked, setting her pen down mid-sentence. "LA? What for?" "I'm comms, not your personal assistant." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "There's a big investor down there, Mark Ellison. He's on the fence about funding our next round. I need someone who can talk him into it, and you've got a mouth that doesn't quit." Lila bristled. "I'm not your hype girl, Hayes. Send sales." His stare didn't waver. "Sales can't think on their feet like you. You're coming. Flight's at 8 a.m. She wanted to argue. God, did she want to, but the way he said it left no room for debate. So the next morning, she stood at SFO Airport, a carry-on suitcase at her feet, a cold latte in her hand, and Ethan beside her checking his watch like the world spun on his schedule. He barely spoke, just nodded her toward the gate. The flight was supposed to be a smooth 6 hours, but a storm rolled in, delaying them 3 hours. They ended up stuck in the VIP lounge, 3 seats apart, him buried in his laptop, her texting Sarah. Trapped at the airport with the dictator, send help or whiskey. When they finally boarded, Leela sank into her seat 5 rows behind him, relieved for the distance. But relief didn't last. They landed in LA at 10 p.m., rain pounding the tarmac, and her phone buzzed with a hotel email. "Due to a booking error, we have only 1 suite available. Apologies for the inconvenience." She groaned, turning to Ethan as he pulled his suitcase through the terminal, his face blank. "A room? What kind of dump did you book?" He shrugged, unfazed. "My assistant handled it. You want to sleep in the rain instead?" At the hotel, the receptionist confirmed it. 1 suite, 1 bedroom, a pull-out sofa in the living area, and a shared bathroom. Lila tossed her bag onto the sofa the second they walked in. "I'll take this. You get the bed." Ethan raised an eyebrow, peeling off his jacket. "Suit yourself. Don't whine when your spine hates you tomorrow." He disappeared into the bedroom and shut the door without another word. Lila tried to sleep, But the sofa was a slab of rock, the rain hammered the windows, and the AC blasted Arctic air straight at her. By midnight, she was done. Wrapping her thin blanket around her shoulders, she padded to Ethan's door and knocked. No answer. She pushed it open a crack and froze. He was sitting by the window, laptop glowing, still in his dress shirt but sleeves rolled up, his face tired but focused. "You don't sleep?" she asked, her voice rough with exhaustion. He glanced up, those gray eyes cutting through the dim light. "Not when there's work to do. What about you? Sofa not your style?" She crossed her arms, stepping inside. "I'm not whining, just need an extra blanket." He nodded toward the wardrobe. "In there, help yourself." She walked over, opened it, and hesitated. Flashes of that first day in his office wardrobe hitting her like a bad rerun. She grabbed a blanket, turning to find him watching her, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm not hiding in there this time." She huffed, cheeks warming. Hilarious. She started for the door, but his voice stopped her. "Sit. You're not sleeping anyway." Surprised, she paused, then perched on the edge of the bed, keeping a safe gap between them. The rain filled the silence for a minute before she broke it. "Why do you hate calms so much? I'm not the first one you've chewed up and spat out, am I?" He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a second. "I don't hate calms. I don't trust them." She frowned. "Why not?" He was quiet, then his voice dropped, softer than she'd ever heard it. 4 years ago, I had a comms director I trusted. Too much. She didn't just handle PR, she got into my head, my life. Then she sold our product specs to a competitor for a fat paycheck, nearly sank us. Lila's jaw tightened. She hadn't expected that. "That's rough, but not everyone's a snake." He opened his eyes, meeting hers. "I know, still don't like the risk." She nodded, then blurted, "I get it. I've been burned too, not at work but close. My ex dumped me for some intern while I was chasing a story in Chicago. Took me years to stop looking over my shoulder." Ethan studied her, his gaze softening just a fraction. "You? I figured you'd be the one breaking hearts." She smirked. "I'm calm spin stories, not relationships. Clearly I suck at it." He chuckled, a low, real sound that caught her off guard. "Maybe we're not so different," he said, turning to stare at the rain. Screwed over and still swinging, they talked longer than she expected. About work, old wounds, the kind of stuff you don't share with someone you're supposed to hate. By the time she grabbed the blanket and headed back to the sofa, Ethan didn't feel like just the dictator anymore. He was a guy who'd been knocked down like her, and that shifted something she couldn't quite name. The next morning, they met Ellison together. The guy was a hard sell, 50s, slick suit, all skepticism, but Lila turned on the charm, weaving stats and vision into a pitch that had him nodding by the end. Ethan stayed quiet, but as they left, he said, "Good work today. Maybe I misjudged you." She grinned, tossing back, "Don't get soft on me now, Hayes." He smirked, and for once, it didn't piss her off. Maybe this trip was more than a headache. Maybe it was a crack in the wall between them. After the LA trip, things between Lila Carter and Ethan Hayes weren't the same. The icy emails slowed down, the glares in meetings softened, and Lila caught herself wondering if that late-night talk in the hotel had actually gotten under his skin. Or hers. She shoved the thought aside, telling herself Ethan was still the same hard-ass CEO she'd dubbed a dictator. She wasn't about to go soft just because he'd shown a flicker of humanity. But then Friday rolled around, and Ethan threw her another curveball. He walked into her office just as she was packing up, his gray suit sharp but his expression tight, almost nervous, which wasn't a look she'd seen on him before. "Carter, I need a favor," he said, closing the door. She slung her bag over her shoulder, eyeing him. "If it's about slashing my budget again, I'm out the door." He didn't crack a smile. "It's not work. It's personal. My mom set me up on a date tonight. Some friend's daughter. I'm not going, but she won't drop it unless I've got a reason." Lila snorted, fighting a laugh. "What, you need me to call her and say you're busy?" He stepped closer, voice low. No, I need you to come with me. Pretend you're my girlfriend. She nearly dropped her bag. You're kidding. Me? Fake dating you? He didn't flinch. You're the best shot I've got. You're quick on your feet. I saw it in L.A. And he paused, like the next part stuck in his throat. I trust you. That stopped her cold. Trust? From Ethan Hayes? She crossed her arms. I'm not an actress, Hayes. Hire someone. His lips twitched, that half smirk she knew too well. You're better than any actress. Plus, I'll owe you. Name your price. She sighed, knowing she was already in too deep to say no. Fine, but you're greenlighting my next campaign. No cuts. He nodded. Deal. That night, Leela stood in front of her mirror, tugging at the hem of a little black dress she hadn't worn in years. Her hair fell loose, a rare break from her usual ponytail. It's just a gig, she muttered, in and out. Ethan picked her up in his Tesla, giving her a quick once-over. You clean up okay? He said, pulling onto the road. She smirked. Gee, thanks. You're a real charmer. They hit an upscale Italian spot in the Mission District. Ethan's mom, Margaret Hayes, was waiting. A classy woman in her late 60s with silver hair and a pearl necklace that screamed old money. Next to her sat Lauren, a perky blonde who lit up when she saw Ethan, until he walked in with Lila's arm tucked into his. Mom, this is Lila, he said, smooth as silk. My girlfriend, Lila flashed a grin, sliding into character. So nice to meet you, Mrs. Hayes. Ethan's told me all about you. Margaret blinked, recovering fast with a tight smile. I didn't know Ethan was seeing someone. Lauren deflated, but Lila kept the act rolling. I'm Novatech's comms director, she said, giving Ethan's arm a light squeeze. We met at work and it just clicked. She shot him a teasing look, daring him to play along. Margaret leaned in. How lovely. When did this start? Ethan jumped in, deadpan. She spilled coffee on me in a meeting, had to make it up to me. Lila nearly choked on her water but laughed it off. He's stubborn, but I won him over. Dinner went off without a hitch. Lila spinning tales of fake dates, Ethan nodding along, even throwing in, she's a handful, but I like it. She kicked him under the table, but her grin stayed plastered on. By the end, Margaret squeezed her hand. You're a gem, Lila. Ethan's lucky. Lila just smiled, thinking, if you only knew. The charade didn't stay quiet. By Monday, Novatech was buzzing. Someone, probably Mia from engineering, had spotted them at the restaurant and snapped a blurry pic. It hit the company Slack with a caption, CEO and comms director, couple goals. Sarah texted Lila non-stop. You and Hayes? Spill it. Lila shot back, fake news. Don't buy it. But the whispers followed her everywhere. At the Christmas party a month later, held at a swanky hotel downtown, the rumors hit fever pitch. Lila wore a deep red dress, determined to ignore the stares, but Ethan was there. Black suit, tie undone, a glass of bourbon in hand. Carter, he called as she grabbed a wine from the bar. You're late, she shrugged. Not the CEO. I get 5 minutes. The night rolled on, and their eyes kept catching across the room, quick, sharp, like they were daring each other. Near midnight, a slow song kicked in, and Mia shoved Lila toward the dance floor. Go dance with your man. Before she could protest, Ethan was there, hand out. Dance? His voice was low, not pushy. She took it, muttering, don't stomp my toes. They moved together, his hand light on her waist, hers on his shoulder. The cologne from that wardrobe day hit her again, and she hated how it didn't bug her anymore. You're not terrible at this, she said. Neither are you. He shot back, eyes locked on hers. The song faded and a drunk coder yelled, Kiss her, boss! The crowd cheered and Lila laughed, stepping back. Until Ethan tugged her hand. Let's sell it, he whispered, then kissed her. It was soft, warm, and way too real. Her wine glass wobbled in her grip, but she didn't pull away. When he broke it, the room erupted, but he murmured, "Sorry," got carried away. Her voice shook. "It's fine." She bolted to the balcony, heart pounding, the cold air slapping her awake. That wasn't fake, and it scared the hell out of her. Lila Carter couldn't shake that kiss. It clung to her like damp fog as she walked into Novatech the Monday after the Christmas party. The office was a minefield of sidelong glances and hushed giggles. "So, you and Hayes a thing now?" Jamie asked, hovering by her door with a grin. She waved him off. "Don't start." It was a dumb party stunt, but her inbox told a different story. Congrats emails from clueless staff, a winking emoji from Mia, and a text from Sarah. "Kiss the dictator? You're in deep, girl." Lila ignored it all, burying herself in work, but every time Ethan passed her in the hall, his gaze lingering a beat too long, her stomach flipped. That afternoon, everything went sideways. An email from IT landed like a grenade. "Security breach. Confidential AI campaign leaked." Lila opened it, her blood running cold. The pitch she'd spent weeks perfecting, the one Ethan had finally approved, was plastered across a rival's website, word for word, hours before Novatech's planned launch. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "My office. Now." She walked in and he was already pacing, tie yanked loose, eyes blazing. "What the hell happened, Carter?" he snapped, pointing at his laptop screen where the competitor's post glowed. "This is your campaign, your mess." She squared her shoulders, voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "I don't know. IT's locking it down. I've got them tracing it. But this wasn't me." He stopped, staring her down. "You sure? Because I've been here before. Comms screwing me over isn't new." Her face burned. "You think I'd tank my own work? After LA? After everything?" He didn't answer, just turned to the window, hands in his pockets. The silence stung worse than words. By day's end, the whispers had morphed. Lila leaked it, too busy cozying up to the boss to care. Paul, the CFO, cornered her by the elevator, smirking. "History repeating itself, huh?" Ethan's last comms girl pulled the same stunt, sold us out and ran. "You next?" She glared. "Back off, Paul. You've got no proof." That night, Lila sat in her apartment, staring at a blank resignation letter on her laptop. The breach wasn't her fault. It hadn't pinned it yet, but the rumors were suffocating. She'd fought too hard to be seen as a pro, not Ethan's fling or some traitor's shadow. She typed fast. "To Novatech leadership, I'm resigning as comms director effective 2 weeks from January 15th, 2026. The breach and its fallout make staying impossible. Lila Carter." She sent it, CCing Ethan, and felt hollow. The next day, she avoided him, handing off tasks to Jamie with clipped instructions. But as she sorted files, her phone pinged. An old email thread with Sarah popped up, one she'd forgotten. It was from weeks ago, Lila venting about the campaign. "Ethan's a pain, but this pitch is gold. Check it out." She'd attached a draft. Her gut twisted. Sarah wouldn't. But then it clicked. Sarah had been off lately, snippy about Lila's new gig, jealous of her climb. Could she? Lila grabbed her phone, opened a voice memo, and called Sarah. "Hey, you free? Need to talk about something." Sarah's voice was too bright. "Sure, what's up?" Lila cut to it. "The leak, my campaign's all over the web. You see it?" A pause. "Yeah, wild. How'd that happen?" Lila pushed. "Funny thing, I sent you a draft a while back. Nobody else had it." "Sarah, did you do this?" Silence, then a shaky laugh. "What? No way. You're paranoid." "Am I?" Lila said, voice hard. "Because I'm looking at our emails right now. You've been pissed I'm doing better than you. Did you hack me?" "Sell it," Sarah snapped. "Fine. Yeah, I did it. I'm sick of you getting everything. Big job, big shot boyfriend. I sent it to a contact for cash. You don't deserve it all." Lila's heart sank, but she kept recording. "You're my best friend," she whispered. "How could you?" Sarah hung up. Lila emailed the audio to Ethan, hands shaking, then sat back, tears stinging her eyes. An hour later, her door burst open. Ethan stormed in, hair a mess, suit rumpled, looking like he hadn't slept. "Why didn't you tell me?" he barked. She stood, crossing her arms. "Tell you what? That I'm done? I emailed you, I'm out." He stepped closer, voice breaking. "Not that, this." He held up his phone, Sarah's confession playing. "You didn't leak it, she did." Lila shrugged, bitter. "Doesn't matter. Everyone thinks I'm her, or worse, your rebound. I can't stay." He grabbed her hands, pulling her in. "Screw what they think. You saved LA. You've saved me. From myself. From shutting everyone out. I don't care about the breach, the rumors. I love you, Lila. Stay. For me, not the job." Her breath caught, tears spilling. "You're serious?" He nodded, eyes raw. "Dead serious. Don't walk away." She laughed through the sting. "You're still a dictator, bossing my heart around." He smiled, pulling her close. "Then let me keep it." Lila Carter stood in Ethan Hayes' office, his hand still gripping hers. His words, "I love you, Lila. Don't walk away," hanging in the air like a lifeline. She looked into those gray eyes, usually so cold, now soft and unguarded, and felt her resolve waver. "You don't make this easy, Hayes," she said, her voice shaky but warm, "bossing me around till the last second." He smirked, that rare, real one she'd come to crave. "You'd hate me if I went soft." She didn't pull away, but she didn't say yes either. The next morning, she met him at a quiet coffee shop under Novatech's building, the hum of the city waking up around them. He sat there with a black espresso, watching her like she might bolt. She ordered a latte, sat across from him, and got straight to it. "I'm not taking back the resignation." His jaw tightened, cup pausing halfway to his mouth. "Why? The breach wasn't you." "I've got IT and legal on Sarah. She's done." Lila shook her head, leaning forward. "It's not just that. I need out, for me. Novatech's your world, Ethan, but I want to build my own. Something fresh, where I'm not the girl who hid in your closet or kissed you at a party." His eyes darkened, but he asked, "Where?" She smiled, small but sure. "A startup in Oakland. They need a comms head. It's small, scrappy. I can make it mine." He reached for her hand across the table, voice low. "I don't want you gone." She squeezed back. "You're not losing me." "I'm leaving the job, not you. You said that yourself, right?" He stared at her, then pulled his hand away, digging into his pocket. Her breath hitched as he slid a small box across the table. A simple silver ring with a tiny green stone glinting in the light. "Then get engaged to me," he said, not asking, just stating it like a fact. "Work wherever, but be mine." Lila laughed, tears pricking her eyes. "You're such a dictator, proposing like it's an order." She held out her hand, letting him slip the ring on. "Fine, but I'm not quitting my career to make you coffee." He grinned, that light breaking through his stern face. "I'll take your lattes over anyone's." 2 weeks later, Lila walked out of Novatech for the last time. Jamie hugged her goodbye, muttering, "Who's gonna fight Hayes now?" Sarah's betrayal still stung, but the ring on her finger felt like a promise stronger than any grudge. Ethan watched her go from the hall, a mix of pride and something softer in his eyes. She waved, mouthing, "Tonight," and left. A year later, Lila was thriving at the Oakland startup, turning it into a buzzworthy name with her campaigns. She and Ethan were engaged, no rush to wed. She liked keeping him on his toes, teasing, "I'm not Mrs. Hayes yet, gotta manage you a bit longer." One night in his sleek downtown loft, they sat on the couch, rain tapping the windows. She handed him a latte, smirking. "Try it." Hint of vanilla. He sipped, wrinkling his nose. Still too sweet. But he kept drinking, pulling her close, and she knew she'd won. Not just the job, but him, from that crazy closet day to now.